Welcome back to Process Cast with Mark Anderson and Samantha Blake, your go-to podcast for insights into business process management and the technologies transforming the way we work.
Ever feel like you're caught in a whirlwind when it comes to your business? Like things are constantly shifting and you're just trying to keep up.
Yeah, change is a constant. Right. It can feel chaotic, like you're just barely holding on.
Exactly. But what if we could move beyond just reacting? How can we as businesses actually grab the reins and manage change effectively?
So we're not just surviving change, but actually using it to our advantage, making it work for us.
Right. And that's the core of what we're diving into today, how to turn potential chaos into progress.
Because let's face it, nobody wants to just be swept along by the current.
So to help us navigate this, we've been looking at some fantastic material from Harvard Business School online. They have some really smart insights on the whole process of change management.
It's a great framework. They break it down into key steps that can really make the difference between, those change initiatives that fizzle out and those that actually take root and flourish.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Where does a business even begin to take control of this whole change process?
Well, the very first step, and this is absolutely crucial, is preparing the organization for change.
Okay. But we're not just talking about like ordering new desks or updating the software.
No. It goes much deeper than that.
Yeah.
This is about something they call cultural readiness. It's about getting your people ready.
Cultural readiness. That sounds pretty important, but maybe a little vague. What does that actually look like in practice?
It starts with making sure everyone in the organization truly understands why this change is even happening in the first place.
Okay, so like being transparent about the challenges or problems the business is facing.
Exactly. Harvard Business School calls these forces of change. They create a sense of urgency. Like, hey, the current way of doing things isn't working.
Right, like a wake-up call. We need to do something different.
And this sense of unease or dissatisfaction, it might sound counterintuitive, but that's actually fertile ground for embracing change.
Interesting. So it's almost like you need to highlight the negative to pave the way for the positive?
Precisely. Because when people understand the why, the reasons behind the shift, they're much more likely to get on board with the what of the changes down the line.
Makes sense. It's all about minimizing that natural resistance to change, that instinct to stick with the familiar, even if it's not the best.
Right. And Harvard Business School also talks about different types of change. There are smaller, more gradual changes they call adaptive changes. Think about things like hiring a new team member or implementing a work-from-home policy.
Okay, so like those everyday adjustments that businesses are constantly making.
Exactly. And then you have the bigger, more dramatic changes called transformational changes. These are the game changers, like launching a completely new product or expanding into a whole new market.
Right, the kind of changes that really shake things up.
But regardless of the scale, whether it's an adaptive change or a transformational change, that initial preparation, getting the culture ready, is still absolutely essential.
So even with a seemingly small change, if people understand the rationale, the transition will be smoother.
Exactly. And for those huge transformational changes, this groundwork is even more critical. It's like building a skyscraper. You need a solid foundation or the whole thing collapses.
Okay, so step one is preparing the organization, getting everyone on the same page about why change is needed. What comes next?
Once you've got that foundation in place, you move on to step two.
Yeah.
Crafting a vision and a plan for the change.
Okay, so we've established the why. Now we're defining the what and the how.
Exactly. And the Harvard Business School research really emphasizes that this plan needs to be thorough, realistic, and most importantly, strategic.
So we're talking more than just a to-do list here. What are the essential elements of a change management plan that actually works?
Well, the material highlights a few key components. First, you need very clearly defined strategic goals. What are you actually trying to achieve with this change? What does success look like?
So not just something vague like improve efficiency, but a concrete, measurable goal.
Right, like increasing customer satisfaction by a specific percentage or reducing production costs by a certain amount. You need to be able to actually measure the impact of the change.
Makes sense. So clear goals. What else?
Then you need to define your key performance indicators, your KPIs. These are the specific metrics that you're going to track to measure progress towards those goals.
Okay, so it's about setting a baseline and then monitoring how things change over time.
Exactly. And it's important to choose KPIs that are actually meaningful and relevant to the specific change you're implementing.
Makes sense. You need the right data to know if you're on track.
Absolutely. Next, your plan needs to clearly identify the project stakeholders and the core team who will be responsible for driving the change.
So who are the people who have a vested interest in this change? Who needs to be involved in decision-making?
Exactly. Who needs to give approval at different stages? And then, very importantly, who is responsible for actually carrying out the various parts of the plan?
Right. You need to have clear roles and responsibilities so everyone knows what they're accountable for.
Absolutely. And finally, you need to define the scope of the project. What specific actions are included within the boundaries of this change initiative? And just as important, what falls outside of it?
Okay, so it's about setting clear boundaries. What are we focusing on and what are we not focusing on?
Exactly. Because it's easy for a change project to balloon and get off track if you don't have a well-defined scope.
This is a really solid framework. But let's be real, in the real world, things don't always go according to plan. How much flexibility should you, the business, build into this?
That's a great point. And Harvard Business School acknowledges that while a structured approach is essential, you also need to be able to adapt. Because unexpected challenges, they're going to come up. It's pretty much guaranteed.
Right, so it's about having a plan but not being afraid to deviate from it when necessary.
Exactly. You need that balance of having a roadmap, but also being agile enough to adjust course when you hit a roadblock.
Yeah.
Like using your GPS for navigation. You have your route plan, but you're also prepared to take a detour if there's an accident or road closure.
Makes sense. So step 1, we prepare the organization. Step 2, we create a vision and a plan. Now it's time to actually put that plan into action, right?
That's step 3, implementing the changes. This is where the rubber meets the road.
So you've got your blueprint, now you're starting to build.
Exactly. And Harvard Business School points out that the specifics of what you're actually doing in this stage will depend a lot on the nature of the change itself.
Right, like implementing a new CRM system is going to be very different from trying to shift a company culture that's been ingrained for years.
For sure. But there's some common threads. And one of the most important is the role of the change manager, the person who's leading this effort.
Okay, so even though the specifics of the change might vary, the role of the person leading it remains crucial. What do they need to be focusing on?
They need to empower their employees to take ownership of the changes, to give them the resources and support they need to succeed.
So not just telling people what to do, but actually equipping them to do it.
Exactly. And they need to be on the lookout for and celebrate those early quick wins, those small victories that build momentum and boost morale.
Right, because seeing progress, even small progress, can be really motivating, especially when you're going through a big change.
For sure. And of course, the change manager also needs to be able to identify and address any roadblocks that pop up.
Because let's be honest, there are always roadblocks.
Absolutely. And throughout this whole implementation phase, Harvard Business School emphasizes the importance of constant communication.
Okay, so keeping everyone informed about the vision, the goals, and how their individual work fits into the bigger picture.
Exactly. Because it's easy for people to feel lost or disconnected during a big change initiative. So clear, consistent communication is key.
Okay, so the changes are implemented. Everyone's using the new system. The new processes are in place. Are we done?
You'd think so, right? But there's one more crucial step.
Okay, what's that?
It's step 4, embedding the changes. This is all about making sure the changes stick, that they become part of the company culture and the way things are done on a daily basis.
This is so important, isn't it? Because it's easy for people to revert back to old habits once the initial excitement of the change has worn off.
It is, especially when you're talking about changes to core processes, deep-seated cultural norms, or the overall company strategy.
So how do you actually make these changes stick? How do you prevent that backsliding?
Harvard Business School suggests a few key levers. One is to look at your organizational structures. Do they support the new way of working?
Okay, so like if you're trying to foster a more collaborative culture, your team structure should reflect that.
Exactly. And then you need to look at your control mechanisms. Are they aligned with the changes?
So like your performance management systems, your reporting structures, all of those things.
Right. And maybe most importantly, you need to look at your rewards systems. Are you recognizing and rewarding the behaviors that you want to see more of?
Right, because people respond to incentives. You want to make sure you're rewarding the behaviors that support the changes you've implemented.
Exactly. So it's about weaving the new ways of working into the very fabric of how the organization functions.
Making it the new normal.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've prepared, we've planned, we've implemented, and we've embedded the changes. Can we finally declare victory?
Well, there's one final step. It's step 5. reviewing your progress and analyzing the results.
So taking a step back and assessing whether the changes actually achieved what you set out to do.
Exactly. Harvard Business School calls this a project post-mortem. And it's not just about checking boxes. It's about truly understanding the impact of the changes.
So looking at those KPIs we talked about earlier and seeing if the needle has actually moved.
Right. Did the changes have the intended effect? Was it a success, a failure, or somewhere in between?
And what's the real value of doing this kind of post-implementation review, especially if the outcome wasn't entirely positive?
The real value is in the learning. This review can provide incredibly valuable insights and lessons learned that you can apply to future change efforts.
Okay, so it's about getting better at managing change, even if this particular change wasn't a perfect success.
Exactly. You need to ask those tough questions. What worked well? What didn't work? What can we do differently next time?
So it's a continuous improvement cycle.
Absolutely. And, when you take all 5 of these steps together, the insights from Harvard Business School really boil down to a few key considerations for managers.
Okay, so what are the crucial questions that managers should be asking themselves throughout this whole change management process?
The first one is, do you really understand the forces that are driving the need for change? Because if you don't understand the root cause, you're going to struggle to implement solutions that actually address the real problems.
It's like treating the symptoms without addressing the underlying illness.
Exactly. The second question is, do you have a well-defined plan? As we've discussed, having a clear strategy is absolutely essential for guiding the change.
It's amazing how often businesses try to implement change without a solid plan.
It really is. And then the third question is, how will you communicate the change effectively? You need a communication strategy that keeps everyone informed and engaged throughout the process.
Because communication is key during any kind of transition, especially when there's uncertainty.
Absolutely. And the final question is, have you thought about potential roadblocks and how you'll overcome them?
Because as we've said, there will always be roadblocks. So it's about anticipating them and having a plan to deal with them.
Exactly. So those are the key questions. Understanding the forces, having a plan, communicating effectively, and anticipating roadblocks.
Really practical advice for any manager facing organizational change.
And while every change is going to be unique, these 5 steps, preparing the organization, creating a vision and a plan, implementing the changes, embedding them, and then reviewing the results, they provide a really solid framework for navigating the whole process.
And ultimately, it's about moving beyond just surviving change to actually leveraging change to drive your business forward.
Exactly.
So for you, the listener, think about the changes that are happening in your organization or the changes that you yourself are leading. Which of these steps do you typically handle well? And in which areas might you need to focus more in the future? Because proactively addressing those potential weaknesses, that's where the real magic happens.
It's about moving beyond just weathering the storm to actually harnessing the power of change to propel your business forward.
I love that analogy. So as you reflect on your own experiences with change, what stands out to you? What have you learned?
Thank you for listening to ProcessCast. This episode was brought to you by HEFLO, the BPM platform that empowers businesses to document, automate, and optimize their processes with AI. Experience the intelligence to simplify complex business processes and accelerate your growth with our complete management solution. Visit heflo.com to learn more. Be sure to follow ProcessCast for more insights on business process management, and don't forget to share this episode with your network. Until next time.